Hi, my name is Ashley and I'm a mom of two little girls. I have a 4-year-old named Kylie and I also have a 2-year-old named Mia, but not for long. They're about to be 5 and 3 in like a month and a half, which is crazy. I've been doing Montessori at home with both of them since they were infants, and my husband and I have always had the plan to send them to a brick and mortar Montessori school when it came time for preschool at the age of 3. Unfortunately, a year and a half ago, when my first daughter was finally old enough to go, she was enrolled for a very short amount of time before we decided to pull her out because of the pandemic, and we just haven't felt safe enough to send her back. So with that said, she is going to be returning in August, as will my younger daughter, Mia, who will be old enough to be attending preschool in August. So both of them will be going to a brick and mortar preschool. But in this interim time frame, we have actually been homeschooling with our older daughter. And that is something that, like I said, I wasn't ever really planning to do. We just kind of fell into it, but it has been great. And I've been asked by a lot of you for an update on exactly what that looks like right now, how it's been going. And so that is the focus of today's video. So from one busy parent to another, today I would like to share with you our very simple approach to Montessori homeschooling for preschool. So I want to start off by saying that the approach that I've kind of figured out over the last year and a half is actually quite minimal and simple, and I really have come to appreciate that. It does not require a lot of space at all. In our home, we actually have one tiny little shelf that's kind of tucked away in the corner of our dining room that is dedicated to my daughter's actual like homeschooling materials that are separate from their normal toys. It's just this one small shelf. Now I do have a separate closet where I store all the materials that are out of rotation at the moment. But for the most part, when it comes to the actual like specific homeschooling materials, there's really not a lot of stuff in there that I'm using for my homeschool curriculum. It is primarily just a bin that contains some of the unit studies things that I've put together, as well as the actual curriculum guides that I use. And that is basically it. The other reason that I really feel like this is a simple approach to Montessori homeschool is that I purposefully do not do themed shelves and themed activities. Now I have done smaller unit studies where maybe a couple of the activities were about the same thing, like about reptiles or about the fall season, but it's not something that like when you walk into our homeschooling area, that one little shelf, you don't walk in there and think, oh wow, it's fall. Like you probably would have no idea because there's just like 1 or 2 activities on the shelf at a time that are actually pertaining to that particular unit study. And then the rest of it is just out of, rotation at the current moment in the closet. So I have some unit studies, but I definitely do not do like full-on themes. And personally, I prefer it that way. I know there are probably plenty of homeschoolers out there who love doing the themed shelves and it helps them to mentally organize the activities and everything. And if that is your cup of tea, by all means, go for it. I'm not that kind of person. I just can't go there. So in sum, the approach that I have taken is light on space, it's light on materials, and it does not involve creating themed shelves. And it just makes me feel so much more sane as a homeschooling parent. So the first thing I want to address is the curriculum that I'm using to kind of guide my homeschool planning. Now, using a curriculum of the traditional kind in a Montessori environment is kind of like a misnomer because really you're following your child's interests. But with that said, there are certain kinds of activities and presentations that you will find in every Montessori preschool classroom, no matter where you go. And so those are the kinds of activities that I wanted to make sure that I was hitting as a part of my daughter's homeschooling experience. There are also certain ways that you're supposed to present some of these activities that, if you are a Montessori trained teacher, you learn those in your training program. And I am not an AMI or AMS certified teacher, so I don't actually know what all of those look like. And so it did require a little bit of me going out and doing some research online. And then the curriculum that I have actually includes some instructions for a lot of those as well. So that was incredibly helpful for me. So I'm using this curriculum to help guide my planning, but like I said, it's still within the framework of following my child's interests and not using it as like a checklist that I have to do everything in the same exact order as it's listed. It's much more fluid than that. Now, with that said, the curriculum that I chose to follow is the Montessori 3 to 6 curriculum that's available from the North American Montessori Center. And I will tell you up front, it was a bit of an investment, and I thought about it for a long time before I actually decided to buy it, but it has been worth every penny, and I am so incredibly glad that I did. Now, that is what I am using right now, but I know that there are probably a few of you watching this video hoping for some ideas for yourself. And if you're like, wow, I am not ready to make that big of a financial investment quite yet, I also have a couple of other suggestions for you that I have some experience with also. The first being the Child of the Redwoods program, the primary program from Aubrey Hargis. This is an 8-week online intensive course that you do with a little cohort of people, and you actually have access to live coaching sessions with Aubrey Hargis, and she is an incredible instructor. The materials that she makes are equally amazing. The curriculum is 100% authentic Montessori, and I felt like it was incredibly valuable. That's actually what I took the year before last when I really first began doing all of this. And honestly, I probably could have done without the NAMC curriculum on top of that, but that was just something that I chose to do personally. So the Child of the Redwoods program would be more than enough to get you started and off to the races. But then if you are a DIY kind of person and you're ready to just like dive in and piece this all together yourself, another option that you could consider that is, again, even more affordable than the other two is to look online for Montessori albums that you can purchase. Now, these are albums that were created by other Montessori teachers who have taken their own training, and like these are their albums that they created during their training that you are purchasing. So it might not make 100% sense to you, but I know plenty of people who have purchased other people's Montessori albums and then just kind of like DIY'd it themselves using the information from them. So that is another option for you. Okay, that was a lot of information, but the bottom line is in our home right now, I am using only the NAMC curriculum, and I think it is fabulous. Now, there is one other program that we are using on top of that, and that is the Washika reading program. It was actually something that I purchased before I found out about the NAMC program, and I probably don't need both. Again, I've got a little bit of redundancy going on here, but I already bought it. There's nothing I can do about it, so I'm absolutely going to use it and make it worth the investment. But I will say that the Washika reading program is a lot more hands-on than the reading program that comes with the NAMC curriculum. The NAMC curriculum has a really great set of these story workbooks and then some mystery words that go along with it, and then actual like reading books that almost kind of remind me of their version of Bob Books in a way. And that's great, but I really do appreciate that the Washika reading program does involve the use of the traditional Montessori movable alphabet. So I enjoy doing both at the same time and kind of using one to supplement the other. And I think they're working beautifully in tandem, but I definitely don't think that you need both. I think one or the other would suffice. Now, aside from NAMC and the Washika reading program, the only other like materials that we're using are just like the baseline, bare minimum, classic Montessori materials that you really can't do Montessori homeschool without effectively. So I'm talking things like the sandpaper letters and the sandpaper numbers, the movable alphabet. We have a pink tower that we used for a very long time, like a mini-sized one, as well as a miniature set of number rods. So like just the bare minimum. And I did that on purpose because I really didn't want to invest a ton of money in a bunch of materials that I knew she was only going to use for a very short amount of time before she was like, you know, moved on from them. But also because I know that I want to send her to the brick and mortar school, and I didn't want to have everything in my home because then the magic is gone for her when she gets to her classroom eventually. Now, those materials are the ones that constitute the biggest chunk of what our homeschooling looks like on any given day of the week. But I do have a couple of other supplementary materials that I will use from time to time. Again, it's definitely just supplementary. It's not like the core of what we're doing, but there are a couple. And one of them is our unit studies bin. So inside this bin, I have a series of Ziploc bags that are all labeled with small unit studies that I have done in the past. Again, not full-on themes, just small little activities that all centered around one idea or concept of learning. And we did them for a little while, and then we were done with them, and then I stored them away for the future. And as far as what's actually inside the bags, it's primarily just a mixture of a bunch of printable activities that I have used from some of the mega bundles that I've told you guys about in the past, as well as other just kind of random activities that I found online that I liked and put together. And then a few of the bags also have a couple of activities that we received as part of our Montessori by Mom subscription. The other supplementary materials that we use just on occasion are a set of dry erase books that are made by Highlights, and one of them is for practicing writing her numbers and the other is for practicing writing her letters. And I love the fact that it's dry erase because she can erase it and do it as many times as she wants to. And then the other one was a Montessori reading workbook that I actually found on Amazon a really long time ago. It's just a bunch of cut and paste activities, but they all follow the traditional style of using a movable alphabet and practicing with 3-letter CVC words and things like that. And she actually really enjoyed it because as a younger preschooler, she really liked cutting and pasting. And so this was totally up her alley, and we finished the workbook quite a while ago now, so we don't do it anymore. And then one final thing that I wanted to share that is kind of part of our supplementary materials in a way. I feel like it's a bit of a stretch because it's not part of our homeschool curriculum, but it is something that reinforces what we are learning in our homeschool curriculum at home. And so I thought maybe it was worth sharing. And those are the games that we play together as a family. We actually have a couple of different games for preschool age children that reinforce basic concepts like colors and shapes and very light reading, taking turns, all the practical social side of it, as well as things like addition and subtraction and odd and even numbers. And my girls love these games and they're learning at the same time and they don't even realize it. So I feel like that's a win for everybody as far as I'm concerned. Again, not required in a homeschool setting by any means, but definitely something that is fun and can be really helpful. Okay, so the next section is how I am actually planning the activities that my daughter is doing from day to day. Now, this is where the NAMC curriculum has been incredibly valuable for me. It actually comes with a series of curriculum maps that are intended for year 1, year 2, year 3, not to be followed strictly in the order that they are listed, but instead to give you a general ballpark idea of what kinds of activities to introduce at the different ages from 3 to 6 and a general flow for them. But again, nothing is set in stone. So you can kind of hop around based on your child's interests and readiness, but it's nice to have this as just like an overview, a guiding hand, if you will, while you're going through this process. And my curriculum maps actually correspond to the spiral bound curriculum guides that cover each of the different subject areas that she should be learning as a part of her preschool experience. And so I'm able to look at the map and kind of figure out which activity I want to do, and then go over to the curriculum guide and look at the actual specific instructions on how to present that activity. Now, when it comes to actually planning the lessons from week to week, I obviously want to be following her lead and her level of readiness as much as I possibly can. But I also feel like I want to make sure that she is also making a little bit of progress. She can't just flounder in one area for months and months on end, or just completely ignore one area of learning entirely. I want to make sure that she is making some progress. But I am not planning lessons for her in every single subject area every single day. That would be overkill, not only for her, but also for me in the planning department. So instead, what I'm doing is I have picked out a lesson ahead of time for each week in each of the subject areas that I'm planning to introduce, and I only do one of them on any given day. So I might introduce a reading and writing activity on one day, and then the next day I'll introduce a new math lesson, and then on the day after that maybe we'll do something from our cultural studies curriculum, so like geography pictures or like a science experiment of some kind. Maybe we'll do something from the sensorial curriculum the day after that. I try to pick one different lesson from all the subject areas and just kind of spread them out. This way it feels like there's something new happening. It's not the same drill day in and day out, which gets very boring very quickly for her. But at the same time, she's also making progress. We're learning new things across the board in all of the different subject areas. Now, with that said, if I notice in my observations as she's working that she needs more practice with whatever that lesson is, let's say, for example, it's a new mathematical concept and I've just introduced it for the first time, I'm not going to do one lesson and then move on to something the very next time. If it looks like she clearly needs more practice with it, I will leave that work on the shelf and I will allow her to practice it a couple of times, however many times she needs, until I've observed that yes, she clearly gets this. And then we move on to a new lesson in that category, if that makes sense. So I've got her actual list right here in front of me of exactly what she's working on right now in the different subject areas. And so just to give you an example, I'll read it out to you. So for language right now, we are working on that red workbook from the NANC curriculum. curriculum. She is currently working through the very first section of it, which is actually the first 26 pages of it. It's really long for some reason for the first section, but we're working through that. And then she is also at the same time working on learning some of the mystery words that go along with that section. And then once she completes those things, the next step is for us to then work through reading the very first storybook that goes with it. So that's her language work right now that we're working on. And once we finish that, we will move on to the next section in that reading sequence. For mathematics, she was introduced a couple of weeks ago to basic addition sequences for numbers under 10, and she's been practicing all of those all the way up through 9 using the colored beads. But the next thing on the list that I've got written down is we're going to move on to learning how to do addition using the golden bead material. So that is something that I actually have to prep once she gets a little bit closer to being ready for it. For her culture and science curriculum right now, we are actually working on what in the curriculum is called geography pictures, which I think might be called the continent boxes or the continent folders in an actual Montessori brick and mortar classroom. This is like their modified homeschool version of it, which would work great. But honestly, I even felt like it was a little bit too like old school. It was literally just manila folders of like pictures that represent things from each of the different continents and learning about it in relation to the globe and a puzzle map and things like that. So we're doing that, but I've kind of amped it up a little bit and brought it into the 21st century. So instead, we are actually looking at an atlas that I have that has gorgeous pictures in it that covers each of the different continents. We're looking at it in relation to where that continent is on our globe. And then instead of looking at static pictures alone, we are also taking what I've started calling a virtual field trip. So I will actually hop on YouTube and pull up a couple of videos that I've found that I've pre-vetted that are really awesome for kids to watch to learn about other continents, like things from National Geographic Kids and whatnot. And so we're doing little virtual field trips with her to learn about the different continents, and she's been loving it. And then for practical life, we're actually going back and doing what I would consider like a back to basics lesson from the grace and courtesy part of it, which is how to say please, thank you, and you're welcome, which is something that she does anyway because we model it in our family all the time. And she's actually a very polite kid, but it's a lesson that I've never actually formally given to her. And I wanted to just like call attention to it so that she thinks about it more in her everyday conversations. So we're gonna do that for practical life this week. And then the last thing that I have is out of the sensorial curriculum, we're going to do a lesson on creating our own simple musical instruments using like little cups of water that have different grades of like amounts of water. So they all make a different sound when they're tapped. And there's a couple of other ones too, but I thought that was something that she would find really interesting that we've actually never done. So that's just the overview of what we're doing this week to give you an idea of like what the curriculum actually looks like. But these are things that are going to change. As soon as she's done with these lessons and I know she's mastered them, I'm gonna pull out that map again and that guide and figure out kind of where I wanna go next and have a new lesson ready and lined up to present to her when she's ready for it. Okay, so last section for today's video are just some of the FAQs that I see pop up really often. And the first one is how I'm doing rotations for my homeschool materials on the shelf. And I think I've kind of already answered that, but I just want to call attention to it by itself. I'm rotating things based on her readiness and her interest. So we've got our core materials out. I'm going through my curriculum maps and guides and figuring out what she's ready for. And when we're ready to rotate to something new, then we do. But there's no set timetable around it. And then if she happens to show interest in some new topic, you know, like I said, last year for her, it was reptiles. If she comes up with some kind of new interest and I can think of some fun activities, maybe some printables or something that arrived in our Montessori by Mom subscription, if there's something that really piques her interest that I feel like adding to the shelf, then I will do that. But that is not something that I'm doing all the time. Another question that pops up is about our work cycle. What does our actual work cycle look like? Because in a Montessori 3 to 6 classroom, you will find the traditional 3-hour work cycle where the children have a full 3-hour window of time where they're able to explore all the materials and repeat and learn, you know, whatever it is that they want to do. But then you might also find that things like circle time or snack time or going outdoors, recess time, maybe that's part of the children's work cycle as well. Now at home, we kind of have like our own home version of that, I guess. So we do have our practical life time where we are cleaning together and we have time where we are eating, maybe it's breakfast because it's in the morning, and then like a snack right before lunch, and then kind of ending with lunch. We have times where we are going outside together, just to get outside for the morning because the weather is really nice, or to go play in the snow. And then of course there is a chunk of time somewhere amid all of those other activities in our morning half of the day where we are sitting down and doing some of that more traditional shelf work, where I am introducing a new lesson to her for the day, or she's getting a little bit of practice on something that was introduced earlier in the week that she needs some more practice on. But by no means is she sitting down and doing just shelf work for 3 straight hours at home. The reality is I have a younger child who is running around and needs things, and my husband works from home, so he pops up periodically to come grab something from the kitchen and says hi. Like, there are things that go on at home that I don't think really make that a realistic goal for us, at least not at this point in time. And I have made my peace with that. And then the final question that I'm often asked is how to go about setting up a homeschool environment like this for multiple ages. So if I were homeschooling both Kylie and Mia at the same time, how would I make that work? And I think some people assume that I am homeschooling Mia right now, but I'm actually not. Like, what we do with her is very informal. It's just kind of like in passing as I'm doing homeschooling with Kylie as well. And the reason for that is because A, she's not even 3 years old yet, and B, because I know that she's going to a Montessori brick and mortar school in August. So she will actually have the opportunity to start out her primary Montessori experience in a school from day one. And I probably won't really need to homeschool her at all, which is exciting for us because that was what I had wanted for Kylie from the beginning, but it just, it didn't work out that way. And it's okay because things have been great. So really for Mia, the only things that I am focusing on with her are just being sure that we're practicing a lot of those sound games, like allowing her to start being able to hear actual sounds in words. Like holding a banana in my hand and saying, I'm holding something in my hand that starts with b, b, b. And she says, oh, banana, because the answer is obvious, but that's the level that she's at right now. So we're practicing a lot of that. I have tried introducing some I Spy with her, but I don't think she's quite there yet. So we're really just at the very, very beginning. Now she does participate in the science experiments when we do them because they're exciting and I'm not gonna tell her to go away. So she absolutely is right there with us when we do those, as well as things like our continent studies that we've been doing the last week or so. Like she's right there reading the atlas with us, looking at the pictures, pointing at the globe, and like sitting for some of the virtual field trip videos that I've been finding. So she does those kinds of things with us. But again, she is not my targeted learner at this current moment in time. So she's just kind of along for the ride. And it's still fun. So all that to say, I don't really have any experience or advice to offer you in the area of setting up homeschooling shelves for multiple ages at the same time. But hypothetically speaking, if I had to do that, what I would probably do is set up a separate shelf for each of the girls just to help keep their materials separate. Unless they were working on some of the same things, then they could have the same shelf. But at such a stark age difference, like Kylie would be way ahead of where Mia would be. And so it would almost become necessary to each have their own like small little space. Or maybe just like the top shelf is Kylie's stuff, bottom shelf is Mia's, some kind of like delineation in some way. That's probably where I would start in figuring out how to make it work for multiple ages of children in one home. All right, friends, so I think that is all I have to share with you today about how homeschooling looks for us at home right now. It's actually really hard to like put it into words and to describe it in a way that makes sense to other people. So I hope that this video made sense for you. By all means, if you have any questions, please feel free to drop those in the comments down below and I will do my best to answer them. I will also be sure to put links down below to some of those curriculum materials that I shared with you, just in case you wanted to find out more about something that you saw. If you're interested in learning more about doing Montessori at home, just in general, outside of the homeschooling sphere, I do have a couple of e-courses that walk you through it step by step. I also just wrote my very first book that is called Montessori Home, Create a Space for Your Child to Thrive. And I also have a brand new Montessori Parents online community that you are welcome to join if you find that you need some more support. So I will also put links to all of that down below as well. If you are new to my channel, then be sure to check out all of the other videos that are a part of this Montessori at Home playlist. And if you're interested in watching more videos like this one, then definitely consider subscribing to my channel. This way you don't miss a new video because I do upload a new one just like this one every single week. Thank you so much for watching today, and I'll see you next time. Bye.